Hello.
So tell me, what is the weather is like out in Ohio, Mr. Michael?
Cold, very, very cold.
We're like stuck at a gas station for the last call.
Yeah, it was literally -10 with the wind chill that day. Or actually, it was -10 out, but it was -30 with the wind chill. So it's still cold, just not that cold.
Yeah, I feel you. Okay. So what do you have any survival techniques? Like, how do you cope?
I travel a lot. There's a reason I go to all those conferences. No, that day I had a bunch of stuff in my truck. Like I had coats and boots and gloves left over because I knew it was going to be bad. But yeah, don't.
What happened to your truck?
It was just a battery connection. Like it was so cold that the battery connection was having issues. Was all it was.
Yeah. I'm on all these mechanic forums, and they were posting pictures of just piles of batteries with AutoZone.
I had to get a new battery last week for my Subaru. I just went, started up, and I was just like, nope, I just had battery problems with my Honda, and I was like, this is like PTSD. Like, I don't want to do this again. But it was because it was just cold, and it was old battery, so.
Well, every time you need a new battery, it's $130.
Yep.
Well, welcome to Repair Radio, everybody. In the past, this has been called the Right to Repair live stream podcast
of magnificence,
things, everything. But so now we're going with Repair Radio, and this is episode 2. And we're going to be streaming live every other Thursday from our channel, and then posting the audio to all the podcast apps everywhere. So if you don't want to watch us,
podcast purveyor of choice,
check it out. So. What else we got? This week we've got Louis Rossman and Michael Oberdick and Nathan Proctor from US Pergon, and we're going to be chatting about Right to Repair. You want to give them a little intro on what Right to Repair is about and why we're advocating so hard for it?
So Right to Repair is the simple and controversial idea that you should be able to fix all your stuff. Whether it is a cell phone or a more complicated piece of machinery, we ought to be able to have access to the parts and information that we need to repair our own stuff.
Kind of like with my battery last week, I didn't have to go directly back to the manufacturer to swap a battery out of my car. So we're just advocating for the same thing for electronics in a sense. Just have more resources, people to fix things. So you're not stuck going to the manufacturer, paying too much for repair costs, and limited parts availability, all that.
And this is increasingly an issue with modern electronic products. I mean, there have been barriers to repair in the past. We have right to repair laws for cars, but the moment you have software and devices, manufacturers pretty much have the ability to have a kill switch on anything. They could decide to pair a part with the product, and then unless you have their fancy software to pair, to tie them together, you're not going to be able to affect the repair.
Yeah, but turns out manufacturers don't really like this, and that's why we're we need your help. Why we started this live stream, just to get more people involved in the movement, to try to get a bill passed in just one state to require manufacturers to give us some more resources and parts and tools. So that's why we're here. But today we're just going to talk about, we've had some recent hearings in some of the states, and we want to talk about your guys' experience and also talk about what the opposition is saying, and give our kind of rebuttal and kind of debunk some of those things, because they're, some valid concerns, but ultimately, anybody can, if you can play with Legos with your cousin and build some epic Lego thing, then you can, open up a phone and swap out the battery or the screen. So we want you to be able to do that easier.
Just in the last 2 weeks since we had our last episode, we've had hearings in 3 states. And so I went up to Olympia and I testified in Washington. Nathan was in New Hampshire testifying at that hearing. There's been a lot going on. And for some reason, all these hearings are in northern states. And so I flew into Portland, and then I was driving to Olympia at 11 at night, and the roads were just sheer ice. And I counted, in a 15-mile stretch, I counted 11 cars off on the side of the road. So we are braving life and limb out there to get Right to Repair done. And I mean, it was really fun. I got to visit and meet some really cool, very dialed in repair shops in Washington that are super passionate, super dedicated to their craft, incredibly skilled at what they do. and really being shut out of being able to repair some of the latest gizmos.
We had a good turnout there, and that's one thing that we're urging everybody that's listening on the call. We're going to post links to repair.org and resources on repair.org, so you can contact your state reps, go to those hearings, send emails. We've made it really easy. So, but you were saying it's really important for us to have people like to show up at these hearings for the cause.
If you look at how any kind of political change gets done, there are entrenched opposition to anything, and it takes concerned, activated, excited citizens to talk about it and say this is why it matters. And our elected representatives are there to listen to us, and they are. We had really constructive conversations with a lot of people. So I think for this hour, we're going to dive in and we're going to talk about some of the specifics that have been going on, what we've learned in some of the states, and also some of the challenges, what the kind of leading repair shops in the world are running into. And that's where I'm excited to have Michael and Lewis on, because these guys are at the forefront of pushing the envelope of technology to figure out how to fix the latest gizmos. Before we started the year, we were talking about doing data recovery on the iPhone 10, which requires some advanced techniques. So we're going to be diving in and talking about that.
Yeah, so don't be afraid to comment with your questions. I'm watching on here, and we've got questions for all the leaders in repair right now. So comment, and I'll make sure to get those over to everybody. So hearings in Washington, how did that go? And I want to hear from everybody else too on if you guys have been to any hearings or something similar. But tell us how Washington went. And
so Washington was really cool. What's neat about Washington hearings is they actually live stream it. So we had people watching from all over the country, what Washington was saying. The Washington bill is unique from the other right to repair bills in that the sponsor in Washington is really frustrated with glued in batteries and devices. And so the Washington bill actually says you can't glue a battery into a device with a screen, which is kind of cool. The Washington bill is limited right now just to devices with screens. So it would cover cell phones and tablets and laptops just fine, but it wouldn't cover some of the other types of equipment like servers and routers that people have been having issues with. But it's a good bill. We had a robust hearing. We had representatives from all the big manufacturers show up. We had someone from Apple, from Google, from Amazon, Microsoft, all sent people to show up, but they were all too chicken to testify. And so it was fascinating. The room was full of lobbyists. They all had their $2,000 suits and are all probably billing $700 an hour to sit there and listen to us talk. And they were too afraid to talk. And instead, what they did was they hid behind their trade associations. And so we've got some letters from some of the opposition that I'll pull up and go through, and we'll talk through later. But the folks who spoke were from these alphabet soup trade associations that you've never heard of, folks like CTIA and CTA and CompTIA, and they're just kind of hired guns because the manufacturers know, like Apple knows if they come out and they're visible talking against right to repair, it's such a popular idea that they're not going to they're just going to look foolish. So instead they hide behind trade associations. And unfortunately that's an effective tactic. So we're going to pull back the curtain a little bit on what they're saying. So the hearing was really cool. We had the opportunity to testify. We had some folks from Free Geek, which is an awesome nonprofit refurbisher and recycling collective. We had local shops, Olympia, iPhone Repair, and Nicole testified and did a really great job. And so we had a really cool group of people. And they just, you get up there and you say, look, this is my thing. Nicole told a story of someone who'd brought in an iPad Pro into her shop the day before, and she was initially thinking she could fix it, but then she was searching around. She turned out she didn't have the schematic for that iPad, and so they weren't able to do the repair. And so she had to tell the customer, just go and buy a new $600 iPad Pro.
The resources to do it.
Bummer. Yeah, so it was a really good group, and that's where we've been successful in these states. Is we get a local kind of concerted group of excited, interested individuals, and they show up, and legislators really cared about what we had to say, and we were able to talk with some legislators after the hearing, and they were really impressed. But we're fighting. I mean, it's 10 local folks up against some of the biggest, most profitable companies in the history of the world. Yeah. So it's a pretty fascinating showdown. I mean, it's awesome that we get to sit and have equal kind of footing with them.
And so when we come in, I mean, again, this is like a bipartisan bill or an issue in a sense. We've got Democrats that are liking it for the sustainability aspect, and a lot of people from, middle America farm industry that are, there's reasons on both sides to love this bill. And so when people get up and have these like the opposition gives their, their viewpoints, I don't know, I don't feel like they always hold a lot of water. But what are the like hard, some of those like the top issues that they raised in the hearing?
Yeah, so I've got a letter here from the organizations, the alphabet soup of associations that opposed us. And I've gone through and highlighted some of the things that they said. But they said, we believe that if enacted, this legislation would lead to grave unintended consequences to the operation, security, and safety of these products. Agreements between OEMs and authorized repair networks, which include businesses of all sizes, would be undermined and provide no protection or quality assurance for consumers. So I'll pitch this over to Michael Oberdick, who runs a repair center independent, unauthorized repair center in Ohio. Is your business providing no protection or quality assurance for your customers?
I would have to argue a little bit on that one. That I don't think we've ever done anything that would cause any type of that recourse to happen. I believe the only thing that we're doing is providing a cost-effective option to consumers that need an option locally instead of going to the manufacturer. I don't think we've ever put somebody in danger with a repair of a product.
But so this is a legitimate question, right? Because the manufacturer is saying, look, we've got our billion-dollar brand standing behind our service centers, and we invest a lot in training and support, and we're going to make sure that we provide a good experience. Why isn't that sufficient?
I mean, I do believe that, when it comes to what we're trying to do here in the independent repair shops, we would need to have some type of standardization on what the experience is like in store. And I think that we can provide that for them. I understand they don't want us to degrade their brand, but there's a lot of good owner operators like myself out there that would be more than happy to operate on a level that would meet their ethics and standardization that they're looking for. I don't think you're going to have a ton of people that would abuse the power, I guess, that we just need to enforce it.
It feels like this is a little bit like the local auto mechanic, right? You can go to the dealer and they're going to do a decent job, but you've also got local mechanics, and there's a spectrum of quality with local mechanics. How do you feel like the quality of the service that you provide compares to what Apple or another OEM service would be?
I think our service is better most of the time, to be honest with you. I think our repairs are quicker. We offer repairs like charge ports and simple things that the OEMs don't offer. That is, like if you walk into an Apple store right now, for example, and you try to get a charge port fixed, they're doing an out of warranty swap, which is somewhere between like $249 and $500 for the swap. The part's very cost effective, and we offer that in 90 minutes for less than $100. So there's a lot of repairs that we're offering that are very cost effective compared to the manufacturer, because when they go in, they're just offered a swap process basically. So I believe there's a lot of services out there like that, and board level and data recovery that consumers need that aren't even offered by manufacturers. So it's kind of a hard argument when we have so many services that we do that aren't even offered by a manufacturer at all.
Well, and that's, I think, sometimes we talk about, if you're talking about Apple, because that's who you're competing with, it's not so much about what Apple will do, but almost what they won't do. Like Apple does basically screens, batteries. What else do they do?
Screens and batteries.
Screens and batteries. So if you have a problem that's not a screen and a battery, their approach is just to mail your device out.
I think that the bends in the phone is a great example for me. Like if you walk into an Apple store right now and try to get your screen fixed and there's a bend in the frame, like at all, that is denied for the screen repair. I mean, call me biased because I'm a country boy from the middle of Ohio, but I can bend that frame back in 10 seconds and put a screen on it just fine. The consumer doesn't necessarily need to replace that phone. I think that the biggest, reason I'm advocating for this and have been for a long time is because of the lack of the options for the consumer, because they're being financially driven in a direction that's not always best for them.
We saw this with the earnings call, just with the Apple earnings call, the fact that they brought up upgrades, or the lack of upgrades being something that really impacted their bottom line, but they don't have the resources to actually do a lot of the repairs that need to be, or that can be done. And so, that trade just always automatically happens.
Yeah.
But
it leaked out. Apple did their earnings call, and they also had an internal company meeting. And one of their employees leaked that Apple had said that in 2018 they did 11 million iPhone battery swaps, which sounds like a lot, but then you realize Apple's selling over 200 million iPhones a year, and every phone that's 2 years old needs a new battery. And all of a sudden, you go back, you're like, well, where is the extra 100 million iPhones a year that need batteries, and who's going to do those swaps? And the OEMs just don't have the capacity. It's like if Ford said we're going to be the only ones who are changing tires in cars. There aren't enough Ford techs in the world to change all the F-150 tires that need to be swapped out.
Yeah, we also need to keep in mind on this point, like how many consumers, like can Apple, just for an example, reach? They only have so many retail locations in the U.S. that can only reach a certain percentage of the consumers.
And we get so many stories from people saying that they have to drive, 2+ or however many hours to get to the Apple store. And, hopefully even under due diligence by getting an appointment. And hopefully they remember that you have an appointment and there's, any number of things that could make that trip, costly and just, not worth it. And especially if you show up and they say, sorry, we're not going to complete that repair. Like that's even worse. We've got a question that came in. King Crane said, I've heard industry express concerns about the risks of bad repairs from unauthorized technicians. Okay. Would trade school certificates or independent repair businesses be a good compromise? I just kind of want to touch on how did you guys learn the skills that you have now? And how is that different than, the genius that's sitting behind the bar that's doing half the repairs that you guys are actually doing? Can you guys talk on that?
I mean, we definitely could use some training programs or more standardization of the training program, I should say. But a lot of us are just DIY people that we, once you've played around enough, you kind of figure it out. So when you look at an independent repair technician, their skill set's much more broad, but just think if we had the information and the tools that we needed to do, how much more precise and good we could be at those repairs instead of, learning by failure versus, when you walk into the OEMs and it's kind of just a robotic level 1 technician or a robotic level 2 technician. I mean, they're just trained on certain verticals. I think that there's a lot of very intelligent and crafty people, one of them being Lewis sitting on this call today, who's probably one of the best technicians out there, and he did not need, certain training programs. But imagine if we could hand all of these skilled people out here who are already doing high level repairs that the OEMs are not. Imagine if we could hand them the information that they need. How good could they be?
And Jessa is on here, iPad Rehab, saying certifications will only make a difference if the OEMs are willing to sell parts to certified partners. So it's like, great, even if, we knew how to do it, we still need the hardware to get the job done.
So I'd be curious, Lewis, what's your perspective on how people learn and what is the skill level in the independent community? How have you gotten where you're at?
I think most people are going to learn best through hands-on, through actually experimenting, not through, because most trade schools that you go to, they're at just the time it takes to set up a curriculum, you're already one device behind. Most of the trade schools that exist for anything considering like close to what we do are typically behind. It's mostly just hands-on experimentation, and you have to find people that are able to it's basic common sense. If I took a long screw out of this hole, am I going to put a short screw back in and vice versa, that kind of thing. And some people can do it and some people can't. I don't think that necessarily going to a trade school is going to be necessary the same way it would be to be, a plumber or a different type of tradesperson. And I think that the resources that are available on, I would trust somebody who's watched Jess's channel for 6 months over somebody that's had 2 years of trade school, if it came to who I wanted to open my phone. And I think that and I also disagree with the idea of creating another barrier to entry, since one of the things that's made this industry great is the fact that there is a low barrier to entry. Now, some would say having a low barrier to entry means that you're going to have lower quality. But as I've been showing with things like the CSAT working conditions, the CSAT training system that they have, which is one of the large warranty providers for Apple, that I would trust one of my first day employees more than I would trust sending something to CSAT. So I don't necessarily think that having a certification program is going to make things any better. I just think it adds red tape and nightmare to the people who are going to be doing the work.
So for those of our listeners that aren't familiar with CSAT, this is when you take your computer, your phone into Apple, and they say, well, we can't do the repair at the store, so we'll either give you a refurbished unit or we'll mail it in for repair. This is one of those mail-in repair centers. And some of the employees at these centers have been posting on forums recently, complaining about working conditions and talking about what it's like. What have they been saying about what it's like working in these centers?
They've said that there's issues with like air conditioning. There is one bathroom for over 400 people. The pay is low. After 2 weeks, people are allowed to just start to working on stuff with it. Now, one of the other issues is that the place is certified to do repairs for Apple, but then they can actually hire people who are not certified or knowledgeable in anything that have never worked on a computer to do something. So you could say authorized facility working on it, but then who does the authorized facility choose to hire? And then there's also the issue of, like, again, if I find somebody who is completely useless, who cannot figure out what screw goes in what hole to save their life, doesn't remember anything about what they're taking apart, but who got a certification. Let's say they're really, really good at taking apart an iPhone 4, but they're an idiot. And then the iPhone 5 comes out. They're just going to put the wrong screw in the wrong hole because they relied on the certification of memorizing everything. So I don't think that a certification would do much. And as you could see from large certified repair centers and the quality of what they're putting out and the amount of mistakes that their own internal employees are admitting occur, I don't think that it would be beneficial to the industry. I see how it could be seen as a compromise. We want intelligent people working on our stuff, and it makes sense. But if the two arguments to that are, A, you can have good people working on your stuff if you choose a place that has good reviews, and B, people who are terrible at working on electronics are already doing it, whether it's in a certified or uncertified capacity in our current system.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. For me, it boils down to control. They're going to say that they provide the best service, whether they actually do, right? But what it really amounts to at the end of the day is that they want to be the ones to dictate what happens where and at what price, and that's how they control the market opportunity. They're saying it allows them to control quality. We're seeing maybe that's true, maybe not. We've seen a lot of reports coming out of Apple's absolutely abysmal repair facilities in India, where they're using independent authorized centers and they're providing terrible service for customers. I'd be curious, Michael, what do you think? What's the big differentiator for you? What's the value that you as an independent add over an authorized option?
Outside of, obviously we talked about, certain repairs that we offer that the other ones don't, but I think that there's a more personal touch to a lot of things that we do. Our speed is a big thing. But I think it really just has to come down to the in-store experience. I think that since we're local, we're giving them a different type of experience versus a corporate environment. Don't get me wrong. My employees are incentivized to obviously work the best that they can with the customer and provide a solution to their problem, whether it's a repair or buying a new device. But I think our experience is just unique because we are local and people know who we are and they have a different trust level with us than working with an OEM.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. We have a question from King Crane again.
Yeah, some right to repair legislation says OEMs must make parts and info available for repair. Does right to repair want OEMs to do this for free or simply make them available for purchase? And we've got some good examples. Motorola is a great example of somebody.
Yeah, Motorola stepped up and said they want to sell parts to consumers, and so they're working with resellers like iFixit. There's others. Yeah, of course, you're not going to provide parts for free. Nathan, do you want to talk a little bit about what the bill would actually require?
Yeah, so the bill requires, 5 things, right? So parts and tools, any specialized tools, like, for example, if there's a special screwdriver required to open the device, you'd have to provide them at fair and reasonable terms, which is basically what they sell to their authorized dealer. So if you have an authorized relationship with an OEM and they sell you parts, you have to then sell others the parts at those same costs. And then, but the repair information, you have to provide that for free. So that would be like the schematics, the repair software, any kind of security updates or patches. That would have to be provided to anyone for free.
Makes sense to me. So the idea is whatever the dealership has access to, if it's the Samsung or Apple or whoever authorized repair center. Ubreak iFix has recently become authorized by Samsung. So the kind of information that Samsung is selling to Ubreak iFix stores or diagnostic software and tooling that you need to make those tooling available.
Andy just commented and said, wouldn't this put those authorized dealers out of business? So
yeah, that's a
great
question.
Concerned
well,
about
so
being put
I
out of
will
business
point
here?
out this is an argument that the manufacturers have brought up. So I have here, this is this letter from the manufacturers opposing the bill. They say, hey, the agreements between the OEMs and their authorized repair networks would be undermined. This is a concern that they'll say, well, we have invested a lot in training our technicians. So you're going to be taking away the livelihood from our local businesses. You guys want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll respond to that. Like, they have to compete with those services in the market against their competition. And if they want to maintain their business repairing things, they'll have to offer competitive service. When we have right to repair with automobiles, does that mean people still take some repairs to the dealers, but they might have a local mechanic that they like better to do certain jobs? And there's efficiency in competition, and choice and control is important. And so I think that, there is some trade-offs, but I do think that ultimately the system that we have works best when people have a choice.
My question would be is why can't I apply to be an authorized OEM network person then? Like, why can't I apply? Apple's hasn't been open in what, 10 plus years? So I don't understand where they're coming from, but I like the point, it doesn't make sense because I can't even apply to be a part of that at this point. Nor like in my areas in Ohio is even within an hour to 2 hours, either of my locations, is there an authorized location? So there's clearly geographical issues with where their retail locations and their authorized partners are at. So it's clearly not, I think they're just mad that they don't want anybody else in the pie.
Yeah, and David commented and said, he said 36 million iPhones sold in the US. However many millions of devices are out there, there are plenty to go around. And there's we just need more people, fixing things with high quality parts.
So what the OEMs would say was, hey, there's plenty of choice right now. They say when an electronic product breaks, consumers have a variety of repair options, including using an OEM's authorized repair network, which often includes local repair service providers, as well as mail-in and even in-house repair options for some products. So what's wrong with that? That sounds pretty good.
What happens when you're in Findlay, Ohio, and you have a flight in 6 hours and your screen's broke on your phone? There's nothing you can do.
I think the only answer to when they say that it would hurt their own their own authorized service centers if they're giving these authorized materials to other people is just so. Just say so. Yep. And is that something that should be the concern of the senator?
Right. I think the car analogy is a good one. That local shops, maybe the shops are willing to fix parts that the OEMs aren't, or maybe they're willing to use a different source.
Yeah, and the other thing to bring up would be, let's say if there's liquid damage on a touch bar motherboard, are they going to compete with you on that? Are they going to compete with you if your iPhone 10 falls in a toilet on data recovery? On many jobs, they're not actually offering a competing service. If you go into an Apple authorized repair facility with $10 million in cash and say, can you fix this iPhone 6 that needs C5202 removed? They won't do it. So there's no competition there. And the third concern, if we're talking about Apple specifically, I don't know how this applies to other vendors, is that Apple is already putting their own Apple authorized service providers out of business, and they've been trying to do so for the past 5 years. They're not allowed to change screens on iPhones without mailing them to Apple. They can't they can't change a headphone jack. They can't change a charging port. They're not allowed to do anything. So they're killing their ability for AASPs to make money at all. And you see this in the fact that there are AASPs that are closing or branching off into other industries so that they can feed themselves. So, if the concern is, well, you're going to put our authorized providers out of business, I would ask them, why are you putting so much effort into putting these providers out of business as is? I don't know if that would work with other companies, but if the argument was the argument Apple was making, that's the counter argument that I would use there.
Do you guys know how many devices that are older than 5 years are floating around Ohio right now? Like, what are those consumers supposed to do with the legacy devices?
Yeah, like I did this. I have this one video where I called about 6 or 7 different authorized service providers. It was 45 minutes long. I called all these providers with different problems, and I asked them what they could do for me. And the answer from most of them was just nothing. So, they're being put out of business already by Apple not allowing them to fix anything.
So let's talk about data recovery, which is a service that a lot of the independent shops are doing that I've never heard of any OEM in any industry doing this kind of service. Can you describe what kind of data are you able to recover if you've got a phone that was dropped in the toilet? What can happen?
Well, you can get oftentimes a full restore. So ideally, if you're able to get the thing to boot up and there's no like software that's messed up as a result of it, you can typically do just a full backup. So you Frankenstein the phone to get it to a point where it works again, which is usually some convoluted board repair. You can see this on Jess's channel where she's running wires under chips and knocking things off of the board in an attempt to make it work again. You attach it to a computer, you run iTunes, it just does a backup, and you can restore it to another iPhone, as long as you have the passcode to it, which, as Jessa and I both know, lots of customers don't include. But if you have the passcode, you can take a liquid damaged iPhone and get almost everything off of it, so that you could restore it to another phone. And again, that's a service that the OEM will not offer for any amount of money. The only provider that they will refer you to ever is a company called Drive Savers that about 5 minutes ago realized that they may be able to make money off of this by, and the people that work there have less experience than somebody like myself or Jessa. I mean, they order chips from me. Like, like the company that Apple is authorizing to do this stuff is ordering chips from the company that they're saying, don't use that person, they're unauthorized, they don't know. Like, really? Like, I have POs here that show that the company that Apple says is the only company that can get your data from is buying parts from me. What the
well, and that's because Apple won't sell parts, right? They're not selling these components.
Well, and Jessa just got banned from support forums for just telling people like, yes, this is possible. Like, I don't even want you to know that it's possible.
I want
this is how ridiculous this is. Apple recommends Drive Savers as the place to do data recovery, yet they will buy chips from me. Like, why are they not? That's how effed up their supply chain is.
Yeah, well, Apple. I have a feeling Apple's not providing Drive Savers with anything either. I think they're
something tells me they're not getting TriStar from Cupertino.
Yeah, even if you go to these centralized repair depots, they don't do a great job. I mean, Apple buys screwdrivers from me all the time because they can't get their own Pentalobe drivers. So this is not a unique problem. It turns out that the free market is good for everybody, including the manufacturer. So one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning was Nicole was testifying from Olympia iPhone Repair. She was testifying, talking about how she couldn't get the schematic for an iPad Pro, and so she couldn't do a board level repair. Can you guys explain what are these schematics? What are people talking about?
Well, a schematic is if you open your device, you'll see that there's all these little square chips, these little black and brown little things that are called resistors or capacitors or diodes, and all those little pieces are attached, and you can see that there's little lines in the board, and all a schematic does is tell you where those lines go. Now, this is so it'll tell me this fuse attaches to the backlight, attaches to the connector on this pin, and it's something that could technically be obtained through somebody manually sitting there and measuring everything. It's just impractical to, even though you could do this, it's just impractical to do so on the 35 devices that come out every single year. But it's just a document that shows you where everything is attached. And one of the interesting things is that they'll say this is intellectual property, this has trade secrets, this is going to allow people to hack our products. But it's just a drawing that shows you how everything is attached inside the product that you already bought. And it's something that you could obtain, that they're already, essentially the intellectual property in that schematic is already being sold when you sell the device. And the argument that it's a trade secret or that it's going to lead to security issues is insane, because that would mean that simply being able to open the device would lead to your trade secret being revealed, which means it's not necessarily a secret anymore. Yeah, so it's just a document of convenience.
Yeah, just if you're opening a device doesn't mean you're going to share all those, But okay, so what kind of trouble can people get into if they open up a device, create their own schematic, and post it online? Like, is there
that would be totally legal. If you made your own schematic, that would be legal. It's just so
it would be. It's just like it's as likely for that to happen as it is for 20 monkeys to write the work of Shakespeare. Yeah. Like technically they could randomly type it. It's just it's not going to happen in a reasonable time frame.
Have you guys ever heard what we call an oops in Ohio? So my dad owns an excavation company, right? And what they do is dig in the ground. They put pipe work. So before you start digging, you have to get what's called done in oops, where the county comes out or the city comes out and spray paints where all of the lines are on the ground for you, so you don't hit anything. This is kind of how I explain like what a schematic is to somebody in Ohio, is I let them understand it's the blueprint to what's underneath the board, kind of like what's underneath the ground. Where's the water at? Where's the sewer? Where's the electric? And we're provided the information like my dad is in the oops in the planning, so that we know where to go and what we're trying to do based on the blueprint, and we don't hit anything we're not supposed to. So that's kind of how I explain in a quick understanding that it's funny that we can get it in an excavation organization, but we can't get it on a computer that we bought. Like I can go trench into the ground and get it from the county, but when I try to fix my MacBook, no, you're not allowed to have all the information of what's underneath.
And so protecting their intellectual property has always been a big argument of theirs, but I think
and they're proactive at it. Yeah. I mean, we have definitely had community members upload these schematics to iFixit, and then Apple sends us legal takedown notices demanding we take it offline. So it's not like they're silently sitting there, right? They're actively using very expensive lawyers to prevent the repair community from having this information.
And you can go after people that are literally trying to steal your intellectual property and give people resources to repair. Like, it's not, they're not, it doesn't have to be squished together there.
And the companies already do this to each other. I mean, one good example is medical. We talk a lot about, personal devices, but, a hospital will have thousands and thousands and thousands of electronic devices, right? and they'll get service for those devices from the original manufacturers and from individual parties, and they'll have some that they service themselves. And the medical device manufacturers will compete with each other to reverse engineer each other's stuff, which, you know, I mean, think about how badly this works for the consumer, right? Like, healthcare costs are very high, you know, like it's a huge problem. And we're paying in our healthcare dollars for this crazy system where, you know, company A, like GE or Philips, is reverse engineering company B's stuff, and they're competing with each other. But all of that is just wasted effort, which just adds to the total cost of healthcare. So, I mean, you know, it's not just that, you know, yeah, I mean, this is literally part of the system we have now, where companies are, with our healthcare dollars, reverse engineering machines that they already have the schematics for, just because they won't share them, because they think that they can reverse engineer them better than their competition.
I mean, I understand the concept. They don't want people reverse engineering, you know, Apple or Samsung's technology, but is a repair shop like me going to actually reverse engineer a logic board of a new MacBook Pro Retina touch bar? Like, I mean, that's what they're trying to say, is like, oh, they're going to, they're going to re-engineer and reverse engineer a product. And I could see that from manufacturer to manufacturer, but giving this information to repair shops who are trying to repair the product, not remanufacture it, is a totally different story.
I think there's 3 points there. The first is that the idea that you're not going to remanufacture the product, or that Michael Oberdick and I are not going to be 3D printing MacBooks in our stores, at least not for the next year. Check us out in December. But the idea is that these schematics already exist. If you have $5 and are willing to go to some Russian FTP server, you can get that schematic. So if that is the case, why don't we see MacBook clones using the identical board? And the reason is the schematic in and of itself is not enough information to actually make a MacBook. It's enough information to know, oh, look, they use the TPS 51982 and it attaches to this resistor over here, which again is something that if a company has an X-ray machine and a scanner and some automated way to measure, they could do this in one day. The reason there's a much more that goes into making a MacBook or an iPhone or a Surface than that document. You cannot make a MacBook or a Surface just by having the schematic of the surface layer of what's going on. You don't have the routing of the traces inside the board. You don't have you're missing all sorts of information. So I understand I can understand if somebody says, this is a capitalist society, we have a free market, and they have a right to protect trade secrets. They have a right to say, we don't want to just give another company a schematic on how to build our product after we spend billions in research, because that's going to destroy the section of the economy and stifle innovation. I can understand that. I think we should keep that out of it and just tell people the truth, which is, with this document, in 1,000 years, you are not going to use this document to clone a MacBook. It's not possible. It can't be done.
The trade secret,
it's
in your hand with your phone, with your laptop. Like you have it in your hand, and the schematic is not going to,
Yeah, like this is, all the schematic is doing is saying where the stuff on this board is attached. And if you have a multimeter, you could beep this out. But now the second point that's important to bring up is that if you have $5, you can buy the schematic online. So if that type of level of piracy were to occur, if schematics were available, it would already occur. We're simply asking for something to be legalized that is already widespread. Because my argument would be, if a 12-year-old with their parents' PayPal account can get a schematic after 5 minutes of Google searching, it's not really a trade secret because it's so poorly protected. And if that very poorly protected trade secret has been out for 5 years and nobody's used it to clone a MacBook, maybe it's not necessarily a secret. The third point that I would make here is this one presidential candidate, Andrew Yang, who had an idea when it comes to legislation, which is a law should be on the books for a certain period of time. After that period of time, there should be some sort of committee that says whether or not that law is still relevant in modern times. And if we look at this when it comes to intellectual property and trademark law, these laws around intellectual property and trademark were created in a different culture. Those laws were created back when every single radio that you bought had a schematic in it. Every single television set had a service manual in it. It was a part of the culture that we fix our things. These laws would not have been drafted the way that they were drafted if we lived in a 2019 culture of people saying, you want to know where a fuse is? No, I'm going to have my $1,200 an hour law firm go after you. So these laws were created during a time with a different culture in mind. None of these laws would have likely been on the books if people were told that this would be used against you to keep you from repairing your own stuff.
Right. They're effectively criminalizing the good guys. The bad guys are already crooks. They're already going to do what they're going to do. But
yeah, because like the idea that an engineer sharing a schematic could be put in prison or something for sharing the schematic of something that is company made, this is like the law that allows that to be illegal would never have been created in a modern climate. It was created in a climate where people fix things. And those laws are obsolete in dealing with modern, modern intellectual property issues.
Right. Well, and the kinds of enforcement mechanisms they're going after, I mean, copyright, there's up to $150,000 per infringement fine if they can. These are fines that were designed to prevent movie piracy that Apple and Motorola and others have abused to go after companies, go after individuals for fixing their things.
I think Lewis makes a good point. I actually saw a good meme the other day where it had like 200-year-old like influencers and the politicians sitting around a table laughing because they said we haven't updated some of the legislation and things in over 200 years. They're just sitting around laughing about it. And I think that's a good point, is that, this was drafted so long ago.
Yeah, I'm kind of leery of using the arguments that, with the healthcare argument, I understand in terms of decreasing healthcare costs, but the idea that we want documents that would allow you to reverse engineer when we use that argument, we make it sound as if a schematic could be used to reverse engineer a product when that is not enough information. So I just don't want to give people the idea that the documents that we're using even have the potential to be used in a manner where you could just reverse engineer and clone a MacBook.
Reverse engineer is the wrong term. I mean, they learn how to fix the other company's stuff, and they do that by kind of making their own schematics. And they, company A, just believes that they can make their own repair manuals for company B's stuff better than company B can make it for their stuff. And then that
makes sense.
And
that makes much more sense.
That justifies us consumers paying more money in our healthcare because they have this silly advantage in the marketplace, which is they're better at writing repair manuals for somebody else's stuff when that manual already exists.
Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. I misunderstood. I thought that you were saying to actually create a new product, not just simply repair.
I think this is a fantastic discussion because this underlies, we're talking about, we're bringing out into the public the thing that every repair shop is using. They're using these schematics. They're doing it illegally. And we need legislative relief.
For what? Yeah, it shouldn't be illegal.
Casually slides off screen.
And somebody brought up a good point. How come car manufacturers don't have the same argument against intellectual property?
Yeah, good question. They did. The car manufacturers did this exact same thing. This whole thing is Groundhog Day.
It's nothing new. This bill isn't new when you had.
Yeah, all of these arguments happened in 2010, 11, 12 when the Auto Aftermarket Association was trying to get auto right to repair passed. They had the exact same arguments. The car manufacturers had, hey, if we have to make the service information available, the Chinese car companies are going to knock off our cars. And here we are, 7 years later, right to repair has been the law of the land since Massachusetts passed it in 2012, and the sky has not fallen.
And cars have lots of technology in them now, and there's
right.
And
that brings me to some of these safety discussions because one of the arguments that we get is, hey, we have. We're very, responsible. We take care of our safety. Agreements between OEMs and authorized repair networks would be undermined and would provide no quality assurance for consumers, is what they're saying. On the other hand,
I feel like it's giving them, more of that.
Yeah. Well, it's something I'd like to bring up. Lewis and Michael, do you guys have insurance for your business?
Are you trying to sell me?
No, I'm trying to sell. No, I just you have insurance, right?
Yeah, what kind of insurance specifically? We don't have insurance that covers if we break a device or if it blows up, but we do have liability insurance, workmen's compensation, and all those types of policies.
If somebody trips on the door coming into your
shop, if Paul blows his head off on a MacBook or something, then he would get 2 weeks off.
Safety is just, you're always talking about safety, but it would be safer if we had these resources because people are fixing things. They're already doing it. We have 7 to 10-year-olds that are, swapping screens for their new business and stuff. So it doesn't, when they sell us that device, it doesn't get, the repairs don't get any more dangerous, I guess, after the fact.
Right now,
I think people are mostly afraid of Samsung Notes, of the Samsung Note thing, where phones are going to explode in their pockets because they got fixed at an independent repair center. So you really have to find an argument to convince them that we're not Samsung with the Note 7.
But right now in Ohio, it's more dangerous to walk into my repair store or the local Apple store up in Toledo and slip on ice than it is to actually get something to come out of the store and hurt you. There's a way higher odds to slip walking in my front door than there is for us to repair something and cause physical harm.
Maybe the
Right.
device will break your fall.
Yeah.
Well, well, one of the things that would probably help is some sort of way of saying if a device is repaired and it blows up, that the liability is not on the manufacturer. Because I don't think that the manufacturer, I don't think that they care about safety. I think they care about the fact that we are in a very overly litigious society where we litigate virtually everything, and they don't want to be held liable for this. You know, somebody is suing Apple over the fact that they don't like two-factor authentication. I mean, people sue over everything, and their concern is probably, you know, that one case where one person gets $1 billion because their phone blew up in their pocket because some jackass left a shard of glass inside the iPhone with a glowing battery. I mean, not a expanding battery. So if there was a way to, I think the way to calm these concerns would be to have some language in there that, or where if the device is repaired by a third party, you're off the hook. Or if the device is sold used, you're off the hook.
They're using accountability as almost like a fear. Like they're taking accountability of small business and turning it into a fear on the consumer, which is not correct. Like as a small business owner, I need to take into account like what happens if one of my consumers is hurt from something I do, and that's like just logical. A logical process, and that's how it's been for hundreds of years. Why all of a sudden are we using something and instilling fear in a consumer that they can't go do something? It's because they want to sell new devices. Like it's straightforward.
They do want to sell new devices for sure. And Jessa said they aren't really afraid of that as a scapegoat. This is the culture that we had where we always fixed our own stuff and didn't care about the fact that the car, whatever, may blow up or burn something in my face, was during a time when people were not suing for virtually everything.
Well, we have precedent for liability if people do repairs incorrectly. I mean, if your local mechanic does your brakes wrong and you get in an accident, the mechanic is liable, the manufacturer is not liable. And so we've asked manufacturers, we've offered to give them more explicit liability protection. It turns out that the existing laws on the books already cover them perfectly fine.
Right.
All right. So that's a great argument right there. So if existing laws already exist, then you could say, okay, so now the next thing you bring up is, okay, so how many $1 billion is the repair business worth? And how many phones have gone on fire besides the Samsung Note 7? Like is this demonstrate that this is an actual problem?
Right. And I feel like we can't allow the standard of argument to be like, what crazy hypothetical possible situation can we manufacture to justify nobody having total ownership of their own stuff, right? I mean, we in New Hampshire, the AHAM, the Association of Home Appliance Manufacturers, testified that, what if you misrepaired the latch on your washing machine and it was spinning and a child reached in and their hand was torn off or something by the spinning of the washing machine. It's like, you can't just...
How many times does this happen?
Exactly. You can't just manufacture a crazy hypothetical. Like the cybersecurity arguments are the same way, right? Oh, what if somebody hacks your thing because you take it to another repair store? And it's like, you can do that for almost any computer in the world except for the MacBook. Does that happen a lot? Do people hack into Dell laptops constantly because the repair shops out there are doing this? I mean, the standard cannot be what crazy hypothetical can you come up with. It has to be like what actually happens in the world.
Right. What's the best way to structure society? Do we want competition in free markets or not? Do we want to control our devices or not?
It seems like what it really comes down to, though, and Jess has been bringing this up too, is just over ownership. You bought this device, you own it, and you should be able to have the resources to be able to get it fixed wherever you want. But also manufacturers have, I would say, an obligation in a sense to, one, create products that last and are not designed with planned obsolescence in mind, but also offering those parts keeps things running. And it just, if they continue to harbor all of this repair documentation and info, we're just going to have, even more e-waste from the sustainability aspect of like, they have an obligation to the consumer to create a product and to keep that product lasting longer because you invested in it and it's yours and you can get it fixed however you want, but also to the planet and just in general. So that's, to avoid, all these crazy reasons and scenarios, really, that's kind of what it comes down to. We're advocating on behalf of the consumer.
I mean, a consumer successfully sued McDonald's because they burnt themselves on coffee. McDonald's didn't stop serving coffee. They put on their cups, caution may be hot.
That was also some really scalding, boiling coffee. Like it was like 3rd-degree burn. She was in the hospital.
Yeah, it is good to have some consumer protection.
But
Well, let's step back from talking. We've dissected their arguments for a while, and it's clear they're going to continue making these crazy arguments. We will continue rebutting them. But how do we get the arguments in front of the legislators themselves? So Nathan, you were in New Hampshire. Why don't you tell us kind of how that hearing went and what the process of going and testifying is like?
Sure. So, I mean, basically in New Hampshire, you fill out like a little form when you want to testify, you hand it in, they start the hearing, and then they just call people to testify. And, in our hearing, there were dozens and dozens and dozens of industry people. It's particularly in New Hampshire, they had a lot of like the lawn care dealers there. So there was like I don't even know how many, there was a ton of people who sell snowblowers and lawnmowers there. Who were convinced, or they're testifying basically that, if people could fix their own lawnmowers or snowblowers, or if, independent mechanics could fix those things, that immediately people would just circumvent all the environmental controls and make those things dangerous. Which, I think that there are good rebuttals for that. But so I was called forward. I basically had a couple minutes to talk. I had prepared remarks, but I almost never read those. I just talk about what I feel like talking about. And there were maybe 5 or 6 people from our side. There was a security expert, Paul Roberts. There was, if you're in northern New Hampshire, you should definitely go to iPhone Guys and the kind of North Conway. They do a great job. They were testifying. Some student organizers from Post Landfill Action Network were there, and then 2 to 3 hours of industry representatives. And so the process from there in New Hampshire anyway is now those legislators have to sit down and decide if there's a version of this bill that they want to advance out of that committee, and what that looks like, what changes they want to make, whether or not they want to vote for it. And in the meantime, they're hearing constantly from those industry representatives. And, Kyle, you mentioned that in the Washington hearing, Microsoft and Amazon and Apple were there, but they didn't speak. They save all their talking for behind closed doors. And they're definitely talking. They're ringing the phone. We got someone from Washington told us that basically phones are ringing off the hook from some of these people. And they're constantly in their offices talking about, and they just don't want to be public about it. But, they are definitely talking to their lawmakers. And if they're not also hearing from, the people in the, their constituents, people who are trying to just manage a technology like normal people and have a effective and inexpensive and a variety of options for fixing their phones and tractors and everything else. Yeah. Like if we don't speak up, then, we're not going to push past.
So we've got to get more of us, more, people that are fixing things and in their faces and in their ear. So we've got a bunch of resources. Oh, yeah, Michael.
I think the key is getting, especially the people doing repair. I'm having Russell grab one for you quick. So we inform every consumer through the door about right to repair, as long as they'll listen to us, and give them a card of how to take action. Because what I realized like a year or two ago was, yes, I can make a dent with my influence, and so can Lewis with our following in the repair industry, but it's more about the consumer taking action to me. So what we've been doing is trying to inform the consumers as much as possible. Russell's grabbing one of the little cards that we try to give to every single repair. We let them know that we'd like to be here in 5 years from now to do another repair for them or whenever they need us. And this is important.
That's a great technique. I love that. Because that's really we need people to be aware. And so we've built a really easy tool for you to write your reps. You can go to repair.org/standup, or you can go to yourstate.repair.org, so ohio.repair.org or newhampshire.repair.org. And we have, if there's a bill in your state, we've got the bill number up there, and then a very handy letter writing widget. So this is the New Hampshire page. It's HB 462 in New Hampshire. And then you just fill in your info, and I'll pull this up so it doesn't have my name on it. And you just punch in your name, and then it will tell you who your reps are. Or if you want, you can actually punch in your phone number and zip code, and then we'll call your reps for you, call your cell, and connect you to them.
We've got another good question. How many states need to pass right to repair for it to have a national effect on how industry operates? You just need
We
one
really
bill
just
passed
need
in
one.
one state.
Yeah, and you know, the nice thing about this is that we've got the precedent, the auto right to repair bill passed in Massachusetts. After that, the car makers agreed to apply that law nationwide. With electronic producer responsibility, the electronic recycling laws that we have, after the first one passed, it very quickly passed in 24 other states. The first one is the hardest hurdle to get over, which is why the manufacturers are so desperately doing everything that they can to stop us.
So you can, go to repair.org/standup, and we made it easy to write an email, but calling in, leave a voicemail for them, just like you're telling a story to your family member about something that you fix. Call in. And then we're going to dive into this maybe next time on just what it's really like to sit down and like set up a meeting with your state rep, because they're there to represent you. And if you call, they'll sit down and talk with you. And even if you just have a repair story to share, we just need to get this in front of more people. So yeah, call, email, and even sit down and have a meeting.
Here's that card. I was just going to show it quick. And if everybody wants a template for this, I can get it to Kyle or whoever. It just says that repair is the lifeblood of local economies. Our members make products last longer, save owners money, and create local jobs. Fight for your right and take action. And like I said, this is just something that we hand out with every repair and let them know we'd love to be here for their next. We hope they don't break anything again, but we'd like to be here for the next repair. And this is super important. And then you'd be surprised, especially in Ohio, with the amount of farmers that we have around here, how much interest level we do get out of it.
That's fantastic.
No, that's great.
Lewis, what was your experience the first time you talked to a legislator?
They seemed interested. They pretended to be interested, and then I think 5 seconds after we walked out the door, they went to, just caring about other more pertinent issues.
So the real trick there is getting enough of us talking with them, and getting them kind of in spaces where the experiences are memorable. Nathan, I know you've been involved in some other legislative campaigns that have been successful. What have been the key building blocks you've seen to movements or legislative campaigns that have worked in the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when it comes down to theory, right? The key is to make the thing that you want to be in the self-interest of the decision maker. So how do we make it in the self-interest of your state representative to support right to repair? They have to hear from enough people with enough of a compelling story that they think, oh, okay, it's in my interest. It'll make me look good. These are the values that I support. These are the people who vote for me or who I represent. And that has to be stronger than the pull from the manufacturers, which will say, we'll give money to your opponent, or I don't know that they would say that directly, but that's the implied thing. If they're really, really upset about the manufacturers and through those associations and through their lobbyists give a lot of campaign contributions, even at the state and local level. Maybe not in every state. I know, probably not in New Hampshire, where it's like mostly a volunteer legislature, but it's a real factor, right? So the manufacturers come in and there's an implied threat because of their ability to manipulate the political process. And unless we can marshal enough public support to kind of change the calculus, that's ultimately the thing. And then obviously this is an issue with a vested, powerful opposition. So we need to kind of have a show of strength on our own side.
Yeah, we have to figure out a way to make this issue as politically sexy as, like climate change or like equity, equality, and all the other things that are, and all the other stuff that's being talked about in the news. Like if you talk to somebody about, if you use a modern buzzword, people get it. If you say right to repair, most people just kind of look at you and go, what's that?
Yeah. And I think that's something that we do really well. Just at iFixit iFixit does well on our social media channels. Just asking people to share pictures of them fixing things and anything. Electronics, that's our mission, but just fixing anything and showing people that we're capable. Because I think another argument is that we were just not smart enough to do this, which is just hilarious. But so the show of force can happening in person, but also making us think about it on social. So follow us on all those efforts and share your stories with us, because we compile them and put together campaigns and blogs to share all of that, because we have to shed light on the people that are actually fixing things.
I think getting out there.
Yeah, and the other thing is really take advantage and pound home every time they screw something up, because that when there's a screen with a cable that's like that, when Apple has messed up something that people have been getting right for 30 years, point it out. When the phones are bending, point it out. Like all of these things, like, but drive it home as often as you can so that the issue finally does become as sexy as all the other stuff that we hear talked about on TV every day.
So I've got links in our description to repair.org and the stand-up page where you can talk to your reps. We have a lot of people that are actually asking about just in Europe, what does right to repair look like in Europe? And that's a whole nother discussion.
We should probably do a whole episode just on right to repair in Europe at some point down the road. There's lots of activity happening. We got the very first right to repair bill passed in Europe. It's very, very narrow for refrigerators, and they only have to make certain information available to certain independent shops. But it's like a toe in the door, and so that's just the beginning. We're really excited about that. We have a really robust network there. Everyone from the Restart Project in the UK to the Roundtable Repair in Germany that's working on getting things together. We had a local group of students in Germany deliver a petition with over 100,000 signatures to the environment minister demanding right to repair. So there's a lot happening in Europe, and we will dive into that in depth in a future episode.
Yeah, it's not called right to repair there, but there's a whole lot more going on. But we've got like 3 minutes left. I want to kind of close on this question here from Nerd Sherman. I messed that up. Okay. If passed in the United States, this should give a global impact to the repair community. Can you highlight exactly what would be affected or what the perks would be? So maybe if you want to go through and everybody kind of, what are you most excited about when right to repair, or, when we have one of these laws get passed? What's the major perk that you're looking forward to?
The biggest thing that I'd be looking for is, like Touch ID and certain things that we need access to on the software side that's causing restrictions. We're turning a lot of repairs away that we should be able to do and complete that we can't because we need to be able to re-enable Touch ID and certain things like that. And that would be huge for us as a small business to be able to have access to that.
I would be excited just to not have to wait a year or two before I can fix something. Because usually we have to wait for some dude in China to leak the schematic, and then we have to wait for somebody else to leak take a spool of chips out back and then sell it to somebody else. It would be nice to actually be able to fix the new MacBook Air without having to tell somebody, come back in a year and I'll be able to get your data. It's just because a lot of the stuff that I want is kind of already available. I can go to a website and find a schematic. I can, Skype some Chinese guy and say, can you find me a spool of this chip? It would just be nice to be able to get the stuff earlier so that we could fix things, while they're still new for people who have out of warranty issues like liquid damage. And the other thing is, I don't know if this is going to happen since, again, Apple says that Drive Savers is who they recommend for data recovery. So it does scare me when they buy chips from me, because it means that their internal supply chain is so bad that if somebody who's even authorized and given blessing, carte blanche, here, repair our stuff, has to buy chips from me, then how bad is the supply chain to the point where they can't buy a chip from, let's say,
maybe they will
NXP.
Improve their supply chain as a consequence of this, if they're going to be
and is everybody, because it kind of makes me wonder, is everybody's supply chain, is the entire way this is set up, is it set up for manufacturing only and not anything else? Because if the world's richest company, it's one thing if a shitty company is doing this, but when the world's richest company is set up to the point where somebody they authorize to do something can't even get a part, is the global supply chain even set up this way?
Right. I think that's really true. We're in a linear economy. And if we want to shift to a circular economy where refurbishment and repair are more the norm, it's going to cause some disruption. But I think it could be really fantastic. Imagine how many more local jobs we would have across the country if we had local camera shops again, if we had local TV shops again. So that's what I'm excited about, is reinvigorating kind of middle America.
Nathan, how about you before we
last word to Nathan?
Okay. I would say the thing I'm most excited about is, ending this assumption of disposability that manufacturers have kind of baked into our relationship with electronics. And once we challenge that, then we'll start to challenge all the other stuff that's going on. And we'll get back to the way things used to be, where people fix stuff, and I think that starts with us, kind of challenging this one first thing with unrepairable electronics.
Yeah, stop perpetuating the idea that things, either can't be fixed, and give people the resources in order to do it. So
fantastic. Well, this was a really great discussion. Thank you so much, Louis and Michael and Nathan, for joining us. I think I mean we covered a lot of ground. Always fun to talk about schematics. We will be back in 2 weeks on February 28th. Looking forward to that. We're interested in topic suggestions from you. We'll have another surprise guest on. As I mean, there's so many amazing experts to talk to. I'm really excited about bringing some of our friends on.
Yeah, and we'll get this audio uploaded tomorrow into a podcast form so you can listen to it. And thanks so much, everybody, for being on and all the comments. It was really great. And thanks to Jessa for being in the comments. It's really helpful having everybody on.
Write your legislator.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to make right to repair happen.
Sounds good.
Have a fantastic day, everybody.